So he'll, yeah, no, all good, all good.
Well, Rusty's good. Now, in your opinion, when does the recruitment process begin?
So, mate, for me, the recruitment process actually begins, I guess, first and foremost, really identifying, honing in on exactly what it is you're looking for. You know, what's the role that you're trying to fill, but actually what are the requirements? So often we see people focus purely on the actual function. So I need someone in an operational role or what have you. But I think for me, first and foremost, sit down and go, what is it we're actually trying to achieve? You know, what's the objective here? What are the needs? You know, the needs of the business. They're the kind of the key things, because what you could then do is you might look and say, well, are we being too focused or one-dimensional here in one particular skill set, and actually, you know, really focusing on what are the behaviors, the kind of the attributes, the skills, the values that they're actually looking for. So it's a lot deeper than just actually filling a role, you know. And I think a lot of people just get purely focused on the actual function. But I think what we've seen, the key word that I've heard more and more, particularly over the last 6 to 12 months in the industry, is agility, because things are changing at such a pace that you want people that come in, and if you've got someone that's almost robotic saying, this is what I do, I go from A to B and then repeat, you know, is that going to get you and your business to that kind of next level? So I think the key word for me is agility, and say, you know, what is it that we're looking for? What are the skills? You know, are the transferable skills from different kind of sectors that might actually come in and give us different kind of thoughts in terms of how we can actually bring move the business forward. So mate, for me, I think it's that kind of conducting the needs analysis and speaking to different people within the organization, that the role that you're looking to fill will actually have a touch point, if that kind of answers the question.
I remember when I started working with Emirates Airline, they were very clear on the characteristics that they wanted in their cabin crew. And I could see through their recruitment process that they were focused on behaviours. They were very focused on that. They're also very focused on the soft skills. So when the recruitment process began, it was at the Hilton Hotel in Sydney, and everybody walked into the room and they were quickly picking off the people. And one of the things that I noticed is the people that they were picking off and removing from the room were the people who had very poor social skills. The people who were very much introverted, stuck to themselves and didn't interact, they were quickly picked off and moved into another room. And throughout the day, they filtered it down to exactly what they wanted. And when I looked around the room as a recruit, I was thinking, this is exactly what Emirates promotes to the world. This is their external brand, and I can see how they've done it in the recruitment process. And I went through that process and it felt good to me, because when I looked around, I said, I would love to work with these people. And so Emirates puts out their corporate brand, 5-star international service. Eventually, we got a letter of acceptance, and then they rolled out the red carpet on arrival. And I noticed that there was a big connection between what they presented commercially and what they gave us behind the veil. And it was one of the same. So when I joined Emirates, all the promises they made at the start, they delivered. I got onto the aircraft. Mr. Tolson, welcome to the team. I arrived to Dubai. Here's a handful of cash. Welcome to Dubai. Here's your hotel on Sheikh Zayed Road, just as we promised, right on the main strip. There's all the nightclubs across the street. Welcome. And it was a very authentic experience. But I think there's a lot of people who are complaining today that what they're promised on the front end, they don't get on the back end. So how does that authentic brand play a role in recruiting?
Yeah, you're spot on. And, you know, when you're actually going out there and looking to bring someone into the organization, you know, you've got to be transparent, and authentic is the key thing. It's one of my biggest values in terms of, you know, you've got to do exactly what you say on the tin. So even with myself, what you see is what you get. You know, I say to people, this is me in the flesh. We're going to take it kind of or leave it. And an organization has to represent the same. So if you talk about things like, you know, great support, great training, great opportunities, et cetera, great infrastructure, if someone comes in there on day one, they don't see that, guess what? It's going to set off a red flag. So, you know, that's the biggest thing that I see in terms of when organizations are trying to hire people. Most candidates, they're not drawn to, you know, money or compensation will be where it needs to be for the actual role, right? And I've always seen this: people who are purely motivated by money, often they're going to be disappointed. So, what we're seeing more and more now with people, particularly with younger generations that kind of coming through, it's around, okay, what's the what's the corporate kind of, what's the feel to this business? How the look at the top down. As the CEO, what is he involved with day to day, any charity work? What's his kind of background? So all these things have a kind of a knock on effect into the actual business. And if you promote yourself as being that kind of business that is, people friendly, people first, it's all about development, we really care, and someone rocks in and finds out on day one that it's actually not like that, then it's really, they're going to have an unhappy kind of onboarding. So I think you really have to kind of practice what you preach. And as I say, not every business needs to be that kind of warm and fuzzy. If it's a case of you say, hey, we're hardcore, this is how we operate, right? We're the best of the best. We push you hard, but you know what? You'll be compensated really, really well, and you'll have a fantastic journey. Then people know what they're kind of walking into. So I think that's you're spot on, mate. Authenticity is absolutely key. There's plenty of opportunities out there for candidates at the moment, particularly where I am still based in Sydney. It's a really candidate short market, and I've seen this even from speaking to people in the last couple of weeks. There's a real shortage of still recruiters. They're looking around the market, and it's a case of there's still not much choice. But they go again, what's the onboarding? What's the training? What's the development? What's that kind of work-life balance? So all these things, you've got to be really clear in terms of what your value proposition is, and make sure that you kind of live and die by it, I guess.
That authenticity piece, and coming back to money, I was working with a sales organization and they were promoting big paychecks, big commissions. And it attracted people because externally they said, come here, we're going to pay you more commissions, you're going to get a bigger clip of the ticket. But inside the organisation, when you walk past the veil behind the closed doors, the very interesting thing was the sales target board never showed a dollar figure. And I looked at that and I thought, that's interesting. You've got a sales team, you talk about commissions and paychecks, yet there's not a dollar sign on the sales board. And then I said, hey, can I use your bathroom? And I went in and I used the bathroom, and on the back of the door it said, remember your non-disclosure. Do not talk about money. So this whole sales team legally was not allowed to talk about money. And so I went back and I sat in front of the business owner and I said, hey, just out of curiosity, what's the big problem here? And he goes, we're losing a couple of $100,000 a month. And I said, do you talk about money? He started to squirm. And I said, do you talk about money? He goes, no, we don't. And I said, well, you're advertising big commissions, big paychecks, but on the back of the bathroom door, you said, remember your non-disclosure. You're not allowed to talk about money. I said, what's the problem here? Is it the team or is it the person running the team? And he looked at me and he said, my mother told me never talk about money. And I thought to myself, 50 years later, it's showing up in business. And the people were dropping like flies. They would start, they would quit, and the word got around that you couldn't make any money there. And that authenticity cost the business a lot in terms of recruitment. And I believe that was a big mistake they were making as part of that recruitment process. What about from your eyes? What mistakes are businesses making in that recruitment process?
Yeah, I think, the first one, so authenticity is kind of, what we talked about before. That's the key thing. It's got to, people look on your website, they check in, they see the videos that you kind of put out, it's got to actually be real and authentic. I think for me, whatever I've tried to do or portray myself as a leader, I've always led by example. So I wouldn't expect anyone in the team to do anything that I wouldn't do. So, been in corporate sales 20 odd years, everything that, particularly in sales, sales is a tough job, whether it's doing telesales, strategic sales, inside sales, whatever it is, it's a tough gig. The turnover rate is quite high across the board, not just in recruitment, to pick whatever it is, fin services, you see it day in, day out. People need to be motivated. They need to know that you truly understand what they're going through. So, in anything, the first thing I look at in sales, I always say, for me, my framework is always, okay, let's plan in terms of, who we actually going to speak to today, why are we going to speak to them, what are we going to talk to them about, Have we qualified the people that we're actually going to speak to? The days of kind of picking up a phone and just saying, hey, Yellow Pages or whatever we use these days, those days are gone. And what I found is, for me, as I've got further into my career, the more successful I've kind of been, the less actual calls and various things I've had to make. And that comes with experience, research. Your brand is a big, big thing. So I think the mistakes that I often say, and I'll probably narrow this down into sales, but you can broaden this out across businesses, doing your research, knowing your customer base, knowing your value proposition. The impact of your personal brand is absolutely huge. Let's not forget, you can have a corporate brand, but people will look at you and they'll go, who is this person? What are they about? Do I actually want to engage? And what I've found is, from a personal perspective, is over the years, the more emphasis I put on my personal brand and the more confidence, and obviously you have to pick up a phone and speak to somebody, the more results that I actually achieved. And so that's my kind of process, which is, the research, the qualification, the activity, and then kind of review. But don't forget that people will be on LinkedIn. They'll check you out in whatever kind of social forms that you've actually got. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, mate, is, the research, the focus, the qualification, but also don't forget the emphasis on you as an individual, alongside that kind of corporate brand.
I love that you mentioned personal brand, because there's a bit of a theme in business at the moment that a lot of leaders don't feel they need a personal brand. They feel that they can lead with that business brand. But what I see with people who are looking for a new place to work, they're saying, who's behind the brand? Who's this person who's going to lead me? And there was one recent statistic I read that 50% of employees are ready to fire the business, which leaves the other 50% ready to fire the leader. And for these leaders who don't have a personal brand, it creates confusion. Well, who are you? How are you going to lead me? What do you stand for? What's the success rate of the people who are working under you? And what's the guarantee that I'm going to have when I come and work for you that I'm going to be a big success? And leaders should be today doing things like this, getting on a podcast, getting featured in the media, so that they have this big pool of recruits saying, if a job comes available, I only want to work for Steve. And I may sit in this other business that I don't like for the next year until Steve is ready to recruit, because I know that I'm going to work with Steve and I'm going to win. And I've seen this. One of our clients in Australia, they have great personal brands. They're always on podcasts. They're always in the media. And one guy walked away from a $600,000 paycheck. He said, I'm going to walk away from a $600,000 paycheck because I know that under their leadership, I'm going to go beyond 600K. And so it was only within about 2.5 years that he got back to $600,000. And then he's gone beyond it. He's up to $700,000 and $800,000 in personal income. And he said at the start, I can only get there through that strong leader. And I know they can do it. And he walked away from that. So that personal brand, I believe, is just so important. Probably underestimated in the market.
100%. And I think, lead by example. There's a massive difference between management and leadership, right? So management is, I would like you, Daniel, to achieve a result. I'm going to drive you towards that. Leadership is show people the way, and they will. Trust is the biggest thing. Okay, so do I trust you to actually help me improve as an individual? Because any employee that's coming in, you have a responsibility as a leader to you've brought them in. You want to help them develop. Yes, there's an outcome that they need to kind of achieve, but what I've always tried to do is say, I'm with you, and I will lead by example. I will do. I've walked in your shoes, right? So I know exactly what you're kind of going through. I know the challenges that you're gonna foresee, and we'll tackle them together. And that to me is the difference between leadership and kind of management. I think you have to have a good understanding, a good degree of empathy. So with the individual that's coming in, when you're going back before around that kind of authenticity piece, do they truly have you betrayed in terms of what they're actually walking into? These are the challenges, the pitfalls. This is the competitive landscape. These are the areas that we really thrive in. These are the areas that we should really play in. So, all those kind of things. And that's where, as you say, as a leader on that kind of personal brand, it's integral. It's integral to, to you and kind of your success. So practice what you preach, mate, is probably how I'd sum it up.
My first leader in real estate, he set me up for success because there was no illusions of what the job was going to be. And he said, Danny boy, for the first 6 months, you've got to hit the phones. You've got to prospect, you've got to prospect, you've got to prospect. You're going to pick up the phone, people are going to swear at you. You're going to knock on their door, they're going to sick the dogs on you. You're going to walk around all day in the boiling hot sun in Mount Druitt and St. Mary's and St. Clair and Erskine Park and Colleton, the places that you don't want to live. And nobody's going to talk to you. And you're going to get rejected 500 times each week. But if you can get through that, you're going to find one sale. And I thought to myself, shit, at least I know what I've signed up for. And he said, Danny boy, the worst thing that could happen to you is that you go and knock on a door, and the first door that you knock on, they're ready to sell the home. He said, that's going to really screw you up, because what will happen is you're going to get another 99 rejections directly after that. And I thought to myself, that's fascinating. So I thought to myself, if I do get the result straight away, I'm going to have beginner's luck, but it's going to be a curse. And you know what happened? I knocked on the first door and I got an appointment straight away.
Well done.
And then I thought to myself, at least I know what's going to happen. And it was true to his words. I knocked on another 99 doors and everybody said no. And there was those days in the middle of summer, 40 degrees, I'd walk around a whole week and nothing would happen. But just like he predicted, you do those 500 connects, doesn't mean they're going to answer, but you'll get a result. And so that 6 months for me was relatively easy because I knew the landscape and he had walked that same landscape.
Yeah.
And it wasn't sunshine and lollipops. It was a reality, and that was his leadership. So when does the actual recruitment process end? There's definitely a start to it, but is there an end to recruiting?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, again, going back to that, you've hired someone. In all my years in recruitment, I've never met anybody that's hired someone that wants to see them fail. So, when you look at people that come into the business, everybody has a probation. The onboarding is key, is absolutely essential. So, just making sure someone comes in, all the fundamentals, that they meet people, they're connected, they get a sense of the network, they get, they understand their objectives in terms of what the role is and their requirements are. That's absolutely key. So I've worked in some fantastic organizations that have had really thorough induction processes, and it's absolutely integral. So you must make sure that people know and feel at home the minute that they kind of walk through the door. And then it's ongoing review, feedback, check in with them, how are you getting on? What are you thinking? Anything we can kind of help you with. But you must make sure that they're not an island. And again, go back to that kind of authenticity piece. Have we, and that was the one question that I've always kind of asked in terms of, is there anything else, or is there anything that I've said that wasn't clear, or anything that, we haven't delivered upon? And, it can be little things, but again, you've almost got to have that kind of checkpoint to be open. So, the lost opportunity, or the cost of getting a hire wrong is significant. As I mentioned, nobody's ever hired someone that they thought, geez, I'm hoping I'll get rid of this person in 3 to 6 months. No one's ever done that. Unfortunately, it's a fact of life, particularly in the industry. I've spent 20 years in recruitment. It's really high turnover. People come in with the best intentions. You've hired someone, you've trained them, but it often cannot work out. So I always think that, for me, whenever we've hired people in the organization and it haven't worked out, you have to kind of go back and review and say, kind of what could we have done differently? Did we support them properly? You've got to really look in the mirror as opposed to out the window. And I think that's a big thing where a lot of organizations, they're still not quite there yet, because we like to think it's all there. Therefore, if it goes wrong, and if it goes successful, then fantastic. But the only way it's going to be successful, it's a two-way street, right? So the employee has to come in, meet their kind of objectives, but you have to support them and make sure that they've got the infrastructure, the tools, the network, the clear objectives that they're there, and you're guiding them along the way, mate. So it's so I don't think the recruitment process ever kind of ends, if I'm being completely honest. But you've got to make sure that you're supporting that person that you spend 2 to 3 months courting, and actually put them through a process, support them when they've actually come through the door on day one.
I've heard the best onboarding process ever. There's your cards, there's the door, go make sales. And they think that's an onboarding. But the amount of salespeople who get that, I talk to them, I say, hey, how was your onboarding? What happened? Well, they gave me some business cards and some brochures. They said the door, go make sales, and it was going to be as easy as that. But one key thing is that mismanagement as well. There was a Forbes magazine article recently that said 95% of recruits have been mismanaged. And it's definitely that two-way street. You can have people out there who are motivated, but the leaders never remove the demotivators from the environment. And it's a big complaint, and it leads to a lot of hidden costs. My opinion is that a lot of business owners don't understand the risks of a bad hire. It doesn't show up on the profit and loss statement. It's not tracked in most businesses, and they don't understand the risks. So you've got decades of experience. What are the true risks of a bad hire?
Yeah, I mean, reputational damage, is the first thing. So you've got someone that's come in. We talk about personal brand, but they represent your business. So you that's the kind of the first thing that you have to look at. No one's when I flip it on its head, when I talked before about no one's ever come in where you want them to fail. No one's ever come into an organization and wants to do a bad job, right? So I think the kind of the hidden costs of the risks there is that there's just not a match. So again, going back to the beginning of the recruitment process, what is it you're exactly looking for? So if we look at it from a sales perspective, right, I want someone that comes in that's going to tear the heads off, whatever, just rip things up, and you go, great, that's fine. So you're looking for someone who's quite assertive, probably a little bit kind of aggressive, very kind of, but probably on the empathy side, they're probably a bit lacking. So, how's that going to work with your existing team? So all these kind of things that you need to look at and think, have we got the behavioral traits? Have we got the values, the right kind of cultural fit? It's key. We've seen this particularly in sales where you have you can have the lone wolf type, and that's fantastic. They might be the best biller. They might be, the numbers are off the scale, but they don't really integrate well with the team. Then you're going to have a different challenge there where, you could have, you can end up with two kind of teams effectively where one goes one way. So, all these things you've got to kind of take into account. So the risks again of a bad hire, they're really kind of insurmountable. I think it's the kind of the loss that goes into the time that you've actually spent, actually recruiting someone, training them, developing them. Maybe you've paid a recruitment fee, which, would typically be a 15 to 20% kind of percentage of the first year's salary. Then the cost that you've actually put into, to trying to develop them. And then if it doesn't work out, the lost productivity, no doubt there's a sales target that you're trying to hit. And then if you have to go back out to market again and try and rehire someone, you're going to start the process all over again. So the best bit of advice that we've ever received in recruitment is, if you're not 100% sure in terms of actually what it is you need, and you're not exactly then 100% sure on the person that you're putting through the process, if you're thinking maybe they can do a good job, you just don't hire them.